Hey yo, this is T.O.T. Thank you for dropping in today. If you have, I appreciate it. The Herrscher bait is real, and quite frankly, the community is definitely divided. I don't think we've had this much division in the community in a hot minute, and honestly, there's two different primary camps here. You have the one camp that feels like the designs of these characters is fine. They feel like everything's being pasted fine. They don't really have too much complaints. They're just enjoying these characters for what they are and who they are and leaving it at that. On the other extreme of the spectrum, you have the camp of players that feel like things have been significantly rushed. Rather, this is in terms of gameplay, or we're talking about in terms of design, or we're talking about terms of lore. Whatever the case is, there is a sentiment that things have been extremely rushed as we go into the final finale of the first part of Honkai Impact 3rd. When Mihoyo originally marketed the shadows of these three character designs, it built up a lot of hype within the community. There were a lot of people that were very excited to see the final versions of these characters that a lot of people have grown so attached to over the years as they see these characters go through their own respective journeys. Fast forward to today, and there is a lot of chaos, there is a lot of turmoil. Originally, I was under the impression that each of these Herrschers would be given their own patch. Now, rather it was back to back, or there was one Herrscher that was released, then maybe we would get a few patches, and then maybe another one would release, and then a few more, and then maybe the last would release. I was never expecting in any scenario that they would release two Herrschers in a single patch. Herrschers have always been a huge deal in Honkai Impact 3rd, not only from a gameplay perspective, but from a lore perspective as well. I think one of the shortcomings with knowing now in the present day that they're going to release two Herrschers in one patch is more than likely one of the characters is going to get the short end of the stick, or both characters are going to get the short end of the stick. And depending on who you talk to, you more than likely might get one of these narratives. And while there are people out there that do have the sentiment that everything is fine and everything is okay, that's definitely not the universal viewpoint. I think something that could have been done is to separate the Herrscher releases, and instead of doing a double Herrscher release, maybe do a single Herrscher release with a different brand new character to help space things out a little bit. I think this could have remedied a lot of issues. I have seen a reference to somebody saying, for example, oh, well, they could have done an S rank Herrscher release along with another character. That probably could have remedied some of the issues that the community is now being vocal about as of right now. But what's done is done. We can't go back in the past, and we'll never know. Now, in my opinion, Bronya has definitely gotten the best treatment out of these three characters by a landslide when it comes to their final forms per se. And I have to say that the Herrscher of Truth definitely feels like the next natural step up from the Herrscher of Reason that we have received years ago. With that being said, I feel like everything is just better. Just the gameplay, the design of the character looks really good, well designed. You go from riding a motorcycle to, you know, Gundam-esque gameplay. Definitely a huge step up. And the color scheme is still there. You can definitely look and tell this is still a Bronya battlesuit at the end of the day. And to be honest, I'm not even a big Bronya fan at all. So to see this and for me to give it praise, it says a lot. Unfortunately, I don't have the same level of positivity when it comes to Kiana and Mai. I'm going to go ahead and talk about Kiana next. So in regards to Kiana, I do have to say for the most part, I really like the animations for the character. I would say they're a 9 for 10. And the only reason that they're a 9 for 10 is that there's this one very weird animation that just seems very off for me. So I can't give it a 10 for 10 on personal enjoyment from a visual aspect. I do like how the devs really paid a lot of homage with this battle suit by making references to a lot of her past battle suits. You have the baseball bat, which is reminiscent of White Comet. You have the gun gameplay, which you could reference to Valkyrie Ranger and to Void Drifter. You have the finger snap from Herrscher of Void. The wings that are down at the bottom is actually a reference to one of Moon Knight Beam's cosmetics. I think that's what they were going for with that, and I enjoy that thoroughly. And then of course you have the aerial gameplay from Herrscher of Flameshin. The only problem that I have with her from an animation standpoint is she has this one weird move to where she's either stretching or striking a pose. It seems very diva-like, and it seems very out of character for Kiana. I don't know if they were trying to go for a Bayonetta reference here, but it just didn't land for me. I didn't really like it because again, it's out of character. Kiana has never come across to me as a diva, so that's just how I feel about it. One thing I did notice, I think Kiana actually does like a back flip kick to her sword. And I think if that was the case, I think that it feels like it's a reference to Titus's Blitz Ace from Final Fantasy X. That's might be where the devs were going with that, which if that's the case, you know, the big kudos to them. A lot of people love Final Fantasy X. I love the summons in that game, just wasn't a fan of the combat system. Now, as far as the design of Kiana itself, I honestly don't like the design a lot personally. I know there's been people that have talked about how this feels like Time Runner all over again, which I can understand that sentiment completely. I feel like to have the stakes so high in this game be where they're at, and then you have a character that looks like they're not going to a final fight, but they're actually in reality probably looking like they're going to be going to a dance or a reunion or something like that. It just feels very off for me. And I'm not saying that she has to be dressed from head to toe in armor, but I don't think this design is it. I'm not a fan of it. I'm definitely probably going to be waiting for a cosmetic to come up, hopefully one to where she's probably a little bit more covered, a little bit more battle ready. That's just my personal take with Kiana. Other than that though, you know, pretty okay. From what I've been informed from her beta performance right now, she just doesn't feel all that great to play as of right now. Hopefully that gets ironed out in the later versions of the beta, but we'll have to wait and see. So I just want to provide a little bit of an update with my thoughts on Kiana's Herrscher form, because I just watched Marissa's video not too long ago, and they took out the one animation that I had a problem with in her combat. So now that that stretch or diva-like pose was removed out of it, her animations for me are now a 10 for 10. I'm highly looking forward to playing this character. Now I just need to address the cosmetic aspect of this character, so I am hoping that when Mihoyo does release a cosmetic for this character, it's more appealing than what she has now, and I'm probably more than likely going to buy it. And then after that, everything's pretty much going to be fixed and taken care of. Now, in regards to the name scheme to Mai's final form, I know they wanted to do that in reference with between her and Kiana, that beginning and the end, but here's my issue with this overall, and this is going to be very confusing for me on a personal level. Herrscher of Ego already has a Herrscher of Origin form. So now whenever I see people make these comments in the future, I'm going to be thinking to myself, okay, are you talking about Elysia or are you talking about Mai? Which one are you talking about? It's just going to be very confusing for me, and I wish the naming scheme would have been a little bit different. I don't know, maybe the devs forgot that Herrscher Ego has a Herrscher of Origin form. I don't know, maybe it was just an oversight. I would have to say, of the three, Mai being my favorite, it was difficult for me to articulate this in words and get out what I was trying to feel. I had to sleep on this for quite a bit, but I think I finally got it pinpointed down. There was something that was wrong with the color scheme, for me anyways, and in order to figure out why that was the case, I had to go back and do a review visually on her past battle suits. And there's one thing that I was able to come to the conclusion of: the prominence of black. So my central consistent color palette choice has been black. So this could have been a situation where it was on the leggings, it could have been on the gloves, or in Herrscher of Thunder's case and the augmented version of Shadow Dash, to where it consumes most of the color palette for those particular cosmetics in general. With this particular cosmetic, there is a lack of black, and even though the black is still there, it feels very smothered by the white on the cosmetic. And I think when the character is in motion and doing their attack animations and whatnot, you're mainly going to see the white. Yes, the black is there to an extent, but again, it feels very smothered. I feel the issue that I have with this is that this character color palette took too much inspiration from the influencer, and there's a lack of pure Mai identity here, at least in my opinion. So let me give you a good example of taking inspiration from something without being completely consumed by that said inspiration. Herrscher of Flameshin. So when we look at Herrscher of Flameshin from a color design perspective, you obviously see the red. You see that this character was very heavily influenced by Himiko. However, we still see the prominence of the white. It's very easy to see. It's very clear. You don't have to look for it. It's not hidden. It's still right there in your face. Whereas with Mai's color palette, on the other hand, the black is still there, but it's very submerged or smothered by all the white and the crystal effects and things along these lines. And when you have this character doing the attack animations animations and whatnot, the white is going to be the prominent color that you're probably going to have your eyes appeal to and attract to first, because that's the dominant palette choice. I think something that could have probably remedied this, at least for myself, is if there was more black here and it was a little bit more prominent. Maybe the bottom half being more black, or maybe the top half, I don't know. Just not a fan of the color palette. I guess that's my overall TLDR. So during Mai's ultimate, she ends up putting on a certain accessory, and I'm not a fan of it personally. I understand the devs wanted to really lean into the Metal Gear Revengeance reference that they're making with this character during the ultimate, but I do feel like this accessory is just too much. Now, on the one hand, I do understand that this was how they could fit in the horns. That's a callback to Herrscher of Thunder and to Lightning Empress. I just wish the execution on it would have been done a little bit differently. I think instead of having this accessory be put on for this very brief amount of time, what I would have actually preferred is if the horns just naturally grew out of Mai's head during that time. I think that would have been pretty badass. But on the other hand, I could also understand from a lore perspective that maybe Mai did want to move away from the horns completely due to the amount of harassment that she ended up getting from Elysia. That's just my own personal viewpoints on it. I think other than that, the ultimate looks pretty solid. I've seen the V2 version of it. It does look a little bit smoother than V1, although I am a little bit disappointed that the starting stance is different. She holds the sword in a more upright position than before. I do prefer the starting V1 stance that she had versus the V2. Now, when I focus on Mai's just gameplay loop in general, for the most part, in my opinion, pretty solid. Don't really have too many complaints about it, in all honesty. The ultimate being a big reference to Metal Gear Solid Revengeance, I'm completely fine with, given the fact that this game has definitely resurged in popularity in more recent times. I'm cool with it. Now, I understand that there's some people out there that feel like the gameplay is lackluster or downgrade from Herrscher of Thunder, and if you feel that way, that's completely understandable. The thing with Herrscher of Thunder that I feel was so revolutionary and still is to this day is you could bring her in for the ultimate, do your thing, be up in the air, literal lightning breath dragon on the enemies. They're hard paralyzed for that entirety of that time, and then you had the option of swapping her out, rebuffing, and bringing her back in from the skies for the finisher. That gameplay loop has never gotten old for me. And the thing is all the other characters that I think I've played in this game, if they start into their ultimate or their burst or whatever the case is, they have to fully commit to it. If they swap out, it ends early. Herrscher of Thunder was literally the character that broke the mold on that and was like, no, this is a two-parter. And being able to rebuff, it was such a fun gameplay loop, and I'm always going to thoroughly enjoy it. That's why Herrscher of Thunder is my favorite of the Herrschers in this game. And I also think that might be part of the reason why they're releasing this particular Herrscher for free. I feel like the devs probably took the smart approach by doing that, because if she was a premium character and people felt like the gameplay was a downgrade, they would have justifiably had a reason to feel upset. But with this character being for free, this is probably going to offset those complaints to an extent, at least for the time being. I do wonder though, what's going to happen to the people that in the future, if they're not able to get this character for free? How would their thoughts be? Will they feel like they got robbed of a higher expectancy of gameplay experience, especially when we look at Bronya's final form and we look at Kiana's final form? How will people feel in the future if they're not able to get this character for free, like some of us will when she at least initially releases? It's going to be interesting how that plays out in the long run for other people who do obtain her, in my opinion anyways. If you've taken out the time to watch all this or listen to all this, I just want to say thank you for your time. Be safe out there. Deuces!